think the whole system there of propaganda and news and blackouts and a country that was in a state of war and that it was in a state of emergency, and all these weird contradictions, you know, where you'd meet people who actually managed to transcend that type of thinking. That's why I said not everybody there, you know, was bad, and not everybody there was good. And then, you know, when you get past all the labels, there was some people that, you know, could pretty much make sense of life in the way that they could in that world. But there were leaders out there. I don't know whether they were trained or whether it was by default or what it was, that were actually quite brilliant. And as life unfolded, you know, the guy that I worked with in the field when I was prospecting for diamonds was a brilliant leader. But outside of the normal mainstream of civil society, so-called civil society. In the military, you know, my experience with my major, who was the camp commander, outside of, you know, the rigors of camp life, was brilliant. But the moment, you know, a higher ranking official came, everything had to be cleaned up and brushed up, and the normal sort of free flow of conversation was removed. So I had some questions around that, some serious questions around that. And then when I worked, you know, in a neighboring country, I found that, you know, exactly what these projects were intended for was just a big lie. It was a bunch of guys coming out, you know, when I graduated from college, to help develop tribal farming systems with, you know, some really smart guys. The guy who was running the region at the time was an absolute bloody bully. And the people were not being listened to at all. And again, serious questions, and my participation in it. In other words, I was still part of the deal because I was there.
Yeah. So
then I lived through a military coup, and it was a violent one. And I just thought, no, man, come on, this is not the world that I want to create. And every time I tried to create the world I wanted to create, there was trouble. I'd be overlooked for a promotion, or and I just thought, no, there has to be another way. So luckily I landed up in a really good job in another neighboring country. And I found that because there wasn't this black-white thing, or this gender thing, or this race thing, or this religious thing. People, actually, you could say just about anything to everybody, you know, and it was fine, it was acceptable. So that was my first insight into what it would be like, you know, if I was leading, almost like the same group of guys when I was prospecting. There was still, you know, in an organization of 3,500 people, where I was a senior manager, there was still this kind of a weird, this is what leadership should be.
Yeah.
But I was lucky because I had a damn fine chairman. And he was completely off the wall. He was, I don't know how he ever got to the top of the pile, but he was the most affable, approachable, conversational person I have ever met, but he was ruthless, right, in terms of getting things done without having to bully or be belligerent. And one day I got a phone call from him, and he just said to me, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in my office." He says, "You're not in the right office." And I said, "I beg your pardon?" I said, "I am in my office where I work, and you've been down here a few times." He said, "No, your boss is gone. You're it. This particular business is in serious trouble. And you know it, and you've had some great ideas. Unfortunately, the other guy can't come up with any of them. And my view on Mashus was that he was ineffective, and why should 3,500 people pay the price for his ineffectiveness?" So he looked at me and he said, "Well, shall I leave?" And he said, "Well, there's a question you feel that I feel you need to answer for yourself. And there you go. That was the end of him. And he put me in there. And I said to him, I said, I don't know how to lead myself out of a paper packet. He said, you'll be all right. That was it.
Yeah, it's finding a different route. It's finding a different perspective, a different way. But it's something that I noticed, and I love this quote about taking humanity to work, taking the humanity into work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was that, but it was also the other thing is I completely defied all the conventions of what, traditional leadership was. It was like, firstly, I should be leading and, and everything had to be adversarial, So we had a union and we had a white collar staff union, and I was in a foreign country, and we had a team of managers and we, senior managers. And here was this 32-year-old who was now the general manager. And I just sat down with them and I said, hey guys, we're in a spot of bother here. So I called them all in and I said, hey, look, this is what I've been given. We have some decisions to make here. Now, we're going to have to rock and roll. We're going to have to grab this thing by the throat. You're going to have to come up with some plans, and we're going to have to put our heads together here, and we're going to have to start talking to people, a lot of people, and fast. Because we had the liquidator standing at my door. And I'll never forget the Span Oils company ever in my life and his attitude to us. We had the bank, right, who, of course, are favorite folks, rattling sabers and threatening foreclosure. We had ministerial deputations coming down and, putting me, on the spot. I had to meet with 3,500 people, me, a 32-year-old. I couldn't even brush my teeth properly, never mind shave, okay? And I had to be the bearer of bad news. And I just looked at them and I was just absolutely dead honest with them. I said, I don't know how we got into this. They said, but there are people that are responsible here and who are not taking responsibility for it. I need your help. And I said, unfortunately, 1,500 of you are going to have to lose your jobs. But I said, I promise to make sure that it's worth it in the short term, and in the longer term, you will definitely be reemployed, first of choice. I sat down with that whole team and I said, right, you guys, what are we going to do? And geez, what came out of the wash there in terms of the most surprising things. Like the union guy said, you know what, we should be bloody angry with you. We should burn this place down. I said, well, okay, well then burn it down. I said, but there's not much else I can do. I need your help. And everybody said, you talking to the union? I said, absolutely, I'm talking to the union. And spoke to my chairman. I said, I need you to give me a mandate to clean this place up. And he said, how many lines do you need? So I got this note coming through the wash to say, Keith, sort it out. That was it. Finished. And in 3 months, we'd steadied the boat. We'd spoken to everybody. And then a year later, we'd paid back all the loans. And everybody that had lost their jobs had been re-employed. And not only that, the guys who'd been, sort of milking the system, so to speak, were gone. There were guys who were just not prepared to budge, and it was always at the top end of the table. So it was those guys, who were directors, and those guys who were senior managers or whatever they were just not prepared to change their minds. As far as they're concerned, they weren't prepared to open themselves up to the fact that maybe they participated in the mess.
Yeah, they were part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, they're not prepared. So, if you look around the world today, the biggest one is Enron. The famous Enron, that huge, big energy supply company in the US. Once people get to a certain level of power, they seem to think that they're beyond reproach. And then, what happens is you wipe out all the jobs, all the people, 15, 20, 30 or 40,000 people that have put their lives into it because of that, the doings and the wrongdoings of a handful of people. That cannot continue. That cannot continue. And because of that, I decided to take it on as a mission in life and go and study it with some of the best thought leadership in the world. So case after case after case. And when I did, surprisingly, the guys who actually did talk to their people, considered their opinions, encouraged, supported, were transparent, could be tough, but could explain why they were being tough and making tough decisions, today are probably the world's most successful leaders. And those are the ones that have influenced me. So maybe a bit more about that when we speak again, but it's about who these guys are. And I always had this question, simple question, which is probably something to pick up on when we speak again. Who would I follow? What?
That is an interesting question, though, because
Yeah,
even with the top-down leadership that we have that's still very authoritarian, a lot of it has got to do with the charismatic elements within that leadership. There's a kind of almost we have to follow the alpha male, alpha female situation going on.
yeah,
And that becomes primal. That goes way back into our primal ages, you know.
it does.
And I think we're very good these days at switching off markers in our DNA for behavior, and we don't even realize it. But unfortunately, we're switching off. We're not switching on other ones yet.
And you know, it's even that's an interesting observation. It's like I don't have a problem with traditional leadership at all. You know, the more top-down stuff, which is authoritarian. So long as people on the receiving end of that type of approach understand the why, okay?
Yeah.
We tend to be okay, and it's we can't say it's ineffective. It is effective because most of the 50% of the Western world, as we know it, or 60% of the Western world, as we know it, still lead that way. Okay.
Yeah, in some cases it's
yeah, but you see, the thing is that they it's not because they taught or educated. If I go to such and such university and I get my MBA, I come out here leading like that. That's the way life's going to be for me. Okay. But they hit this invisible mental barrier of, you know, what about if you ask questions and lead from a different perspective, right? Or a different consciousness? Would that not even be more effective? And then, you know, once we've established that, is there no other leadership growth trajectory in terms of where we should be going? But you see, it's because they don't know. And it's so you can't really blame them, and you can't get into the blame game. What you've got to do is actually, in some way, we've got to teach people to ask questions from very different places in terms of what effective leadership would be. So the first one for me would be, all right, if I was a good follower, what kind of leader would I follow, right? So that was the first inquiry. The second one is, okay, so what do I learn from that in order to become such a leader? Okay, that was my second inquiry. Very simple questions, aren't they? Right? And then to say, right, if I'm a really, really good leader and super effective, and I'm working with ambiguity, contradiction, opposable minds, integrative thinking, you know, what is it I have to learn from the same people that I'm leading, right? In other words, they are as important to me and this enterprise as I am to them. Let's find a different way. And that was another journey. So I took these three very distinct journeys through 7 years. And I said, I'm not going to mess with this. I'm going to find some of the best thought leadership in the world. And I was horrified when I got to the end of it to think, but that's what I was doing with a team of guys prospecting for diamonds, right, out in the middle of nowhere. And I wasn't doing it consciously. I was just doing it because it's kind of just like common sense. I need them. They need me.
Let's face it, Keith. The world has had a common sense-ectomy since,
Jesus.
let's face it, you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I
No,
think
there's
common sense got surgically removed from everybody for a long,
yeah.
long time. Whole generations have just not got any.
Well, I mean, I actually got to early on when I was doing my dissertation, and I thought to myself, there's actually two really good ways to lead. If I direct, okay, somebody, I can direct it from a place of what I know, right? And what if I know what I know? I'm sounding like Donald Rumsfeld now, but if I know what I know, I also know that somewhere in that whole journey, I'd made mistakes, right? And those became really rich as a resource, right? To avoid, pitfalls moving forward. So instead of canning the mistakes, I wrote them up rather seriously. And they said, well, it's a great learning. That was worth millions. It actually was. And that was the one end of the stick. The other end of the sticks is there were successes as well. And also I know that, but by having experienced them in a leadership position or in a subordinate position where I was being led by somebody, if I was able to put those things down in writing in some way and actually reread them to myself and say to myself, is that what leadership ought to be? As a follower, as a leader who's learning, and as a leader who is learning from the people he leads, is that the end of the journey? And have I achieved it? And then you put that through a whole lot of research projects where you're actually working with businesses. And you can't find the exception. You can't find that those things, if you had to calibrate them, didn't exist, as the story unfolds. What I did find is that I could actually put my finger on stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a mistake I made, right? That was a success I'd had. But to sit in my office full of wisdom, as Dr. Kieth Deats, and not share that information with the world means that I'm not leaving this world in a better place than I found it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the mission. It's to say, okay, and by the way, if you do this, you can actually do quite well. You can sustain the growth of your business, and it has very, very strong commercial outcomes.
Also, do you feel that the way that you're doing what you do and leading the way that you're leading, do you feel that that's got an ecological system for releasing stressful situations? Because usual leadership usually comes with a whole bag full of stress and stressors. And do you feel that perhaps leading the way that you are examining and putting out there would release that and give people less of that angst about being leaders, about having that responsibility?
That's such a lovely question. That's a lovely inquiry now, Leslie. Honestly, one of the most understated people I know on this planet. I didn't get to know him extremely well, but in the time that he was my program supervisor, I got to know him, and I just thought, you know what? From where I'm sitting, very few people understand you. And, there's a whole lot of hoo-ha about one of the books he wrote, where people were saying that, I don't know what they were saying about it, but they said it was a really difficult read. It was a 400-page, thing of, a theory of mental development and, and how we develop. When I was handed that as an underdoctoral, or I don't know what they call it, when I was, still doing my doctorate.
An undergrad.
Read it, and I read it again, and I read it again, and then I read it again and again and again and again, and I just thought to myself, this is not possible that this type of wisdom actually exists on the planet. I just got this man. I got him in surround sound, and and every time I get a bit shook, I go and pick up the book, because I know the book so well. And and this guy was a guy called Professor Robert Keegan. Now, I've always taken him seriously, and that's in the Western world today, he's probably, it's just a completely understated person. But when I understood him, he had this one thing that really stuck in my mind. First observations are key to the next. Get to know what's going on for yourself first, okay? Understand your conflicted self, the conflict that you're experiencing within yourself. Understand how you conflicted or you feel there's a contradiction. Remember, you are the person experiencing all these things, the contradictions, the conflict, all that stuff. And he always said that, you know, those first observations are key to the next. And then he had this other wonderful saying, in order to get yourself together, you need to get yourself apart. And yeah, the various parts of me, put them down on a piece of paper. And if you had to reconstellate them, right, in a way that you put them together in a way that you want to be able to think or experience life or leadership or whatever it is, how would that look? Now, everybody else gets into all kinds of blinking mishmashes and convoluted stories, and they write up all kinds of things about this man's thinking. Everybody said it was highly complex, and everybody said it was highly complicated. No, it wasn't. If the mind is open to understanding what this means. So you talk about angst. Yeah, of course I experience angst. Paranoia. Yes, of course I experience it. Why not? But I'm not in denial. So what I do is I actually just sit down and say, I have got angst or paranoia or whatever the emotion is around this particular issue. And then I ask myself the next question, when will I not have it?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. From what you were saying about sitting down with these guys in the bush, there would have been people who were in that position who would have been so fearful and anxious about admitting that they were wrong, and would just be that you do this, you do that, even if they're totally off the boil completely, they would still push their idea forward because they would be too afraid to say, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. And this is a human disease at the moment.
It's a massive disease, but it's not one that look. I believe that whatever we are as a human condition is an ongoing unfolding and evolving in the hope that we one day will actually go somewhere. And for me, you know, it's always going to be a good thing to have a healthy tension between where I am now and where I want to be, because otherwise, you know, what drives me, you know, what gets me up.
Otherwise, you sit in your backside doing nothing.
Well, I don't mind doing that from time to time either.
Well, it's okay for a rest, but
yeah. But I watched a fantastic program the other night with these two chefs. I think Gordon Ramsay was one of them, and they were all Michelin star chefs, and they were mooching about the southern states of the United States, Texas, and they landed up at what was called the best barbecue hut in the world, and it's only open once a week. And the person who was actually doing the barbecuing was an 84-year-old lady, right? Who did this once a week, right? And the other 4 or 5 days of the week, she was actually holding down the job. And I just looked at this world and I thought, my God, you know, so we're conditioned to go and die.
Yeah.
Because she's not even thinking about it. And I mean, they've gobsmacked. These 3 Michelin star chefs went and had a barbecue meal like they've never had in their lives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the world is actually a great place to live in. And I'm always going to be struck with I think it was Steve Jobs who said that if I leave this world in a better place than I found it, and in my case, you know, my theories and practices around leadership and business growth. Well, if I die along the way, at least I was pursuing something worthwhile.
Yeah.
And it was a freely chosen task. And if I can influence entrepreneurs, you know, micro entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs, life in general with these theories, and people do better for it, well, then I think that's part of the fulfillment, if not the complete fulfillment of a life worth living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life unexamined is no life at all, really.
Exactly. So, I mean, if I had to, I remember saying it to my supervising professor at the time. I said, either my theories are brilliant or they're bloody nonsense. And she just looked at me and she said, they are not of this world. They are out of this world. In terms of the hope that I give to the principles of shared success, prosperity, growing businesses in a sustainable way. And then I sit here and I actually get so sad when I watch these huge businesses just implode. Mm. It all comes back to one thing only: leadership.
But also there's that global perspective as well, that, as I think you mentioned in your dissertation about Covey mentioning Einstein saying that you cannot solve the problems of today with the ideas of yesterday, and I'm paraphrasing there. What is it? I think I've written it down somewhere.
So the famous Einstein,
the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created the problem.
Absolutely, and that's the one thing. And the other thing that I've learned through my own life's experiences is, if I get into trouble, even if I'm the top dog, sit down with the guys that matter in the business who are really interested in saying, okay, oh, by the way, you know that the CEO is actually looking for help. He doesn't know what to do. Mm. And I would naturally do that. I would say, you guys, I've actually run out of runway. I've got no ideas left. Where to now? And then you go back into the organizations that you're leading, and the same people that you are so-called leading will teach you a couple of damn fine things. And I know that I ran a family, or worked for a family business in Africa. And without a doubt, he was one of the most incredibly bright, super smart guys. He was just ideas. But he had one failing, which cost him the business.
And that was?
People. And how to treat them. And how to ask questions. And how to learn. Mm-hmm. And he was in this world of class and tribe. Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
And came from a well-heeled family who with many titles, right? And was connected to the top people in government. And he just could not listen. He could not understand that he didn't know it all.
Yeah, but that comes with a sense of privilege, doesn't it? The privilege part actually gets involved in that.
It is, oh my goodness.
Because it's like there's a lot of surgeons who have, they say, what's the difference between a surgeon and God? God doesn't think he's a surgeon.
Well, yeah, but one has to have some compassion here, so long as he doesn't kill me. I'm talking about the surgeon.
But this is it. Basically, when that is, I think, why there was such a barrier between surgeons and patients, because they don't talk to them. That's what nurses are for. That's what, people who are people are for. GPs.
And you know what? And yet there are piles of them that are just, equally we have to say, there are piles of them that are actually just not like that. There
are particularly these days, in these generations, they're being taught more to be more open and allow themselves to connect with the patient. The unfortunate thing with that is when you start caring about the patient as a person, you can start to second guess yourself. And I think that becomes, when you're in that situation, when you have the scalpel blade, and it must be the same in business, when you have the scalpel blade and you have to make the cut, you have to be totally 100% in that moment with the idea that you are correct and right, and what you're going to do is, if in doubt, cut.
Yeah, look, Leslie, with the greatest respect to my fellow human being, we're conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
We're conditioned. We're conditioned to be the expert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're conditioned to know it all. And I'm talking specifically now, in the professional services providers, solicitors, chartered accountants or accountants, business consultants. And the moment you sit in front of somebody, and I'll never forget this story. It's one of my best stories ever, where somebody was paying me quite a handsome fee. And they said, but we pay you to know. And I looked at them and I said, well, you're going to have to cancel the check. I said, why? Because I don't.
I mean, what you could have said was, I know that I don't know. What are you going to do about that?
Yeah, I don't. I don't know. But hang on, maybe you don't know what I don't know either. And eventually that's how we got to the answer. I said, so what is it that we don't know that we don't know? And they said, well, this is the inquiry. I said, well, let's make that then. And then we asked, and then we said, well, what about the other blokes, on the floor, maybe you should be asking them. That's a good idea. Anyway, so I said, but just let me know that what you don't know, you now know. And I said, who are you going to ask? I said, I'm going to ask the staff. So I said,
which presidential candidate was it that went on about that, what we know and we don't know, as long as we know what we don't know? Was that Al Gore or something? Was it somebody?
No, it was a guy called Donald Rumsfeld.
Oh, Donald Rumsfeld, yes. I thought that was brilliant. Because it kind of made sense. It made a lot of sense.
I think that, I don't know whether he was good at his job or not, but, quite frankly, he did ask, he made the inquiry from the right place, from where
Yeah.
But this particular guy, he spent the next week talking to his staff.
Yeah.
He said, we don't know the answers to that. And he came back to me within about 2-3 days. His eyes were like this, and just like he'd been smoking stuff, And he was looking at me and he was saying, I got the answer. I said, well, are you going to share? He said, well, yeah. He says, well, this is what they think. I said, well, they've definitely crossed the bridge from I don't know to we now suddenly know a bit more. And I said, did you get the insight and what you needed? He said, absolutely. What a brilliant idea. I'm very good at what I do, says he. And he goes, and I said, there you go. But just through that inquiry, okay, things moved on. I don't care about who gets the kudos. As long as the guy was able to bridge the gap from I don't to I now know a bit more.
And to be honest, when it comes to inequality, it's the bridging of the gap that's the important part, and that somebody starts to do it.
Yeah, but if I was going to impose myself on you, and because I've got this title and this position and this car and this big salary, that people will look at me and say, "Hey, wait a minute, bloke, you've been paid to know, right? That's why you get. We just gonna not know nothing." Versus
a slightly different approach to that one, but that's another.
Yeah, but if you put that on its head, and you're actually now not leading from the top, you're leading from the bottom. If you're leading from the bottom and you're approachable and you see the person who's helping you grow this business or help you make money or whatever it is as your partner, you can call him an employee, you can call him a storeman, but whatever you call him, as long as he keeps you, if you get that free flow of information from the bottom up, most businesses, they say if you really want to find out what's really going on in the business, don't ask the CEO because he doesn't know.
Ask the post boy.
The post boy or the cleaner. Okay, they are, and let me tell you, these are just hardworking people, right? And if you sit down with them and you talk to them, the same story that I told you about when I lived in the bush and away from society with these guys. Without them there, I didn't have a hope. Okay, and when I did a major turnaround, without the people, I didn't have a hope.
I remember you telling me a story about was it a janitor or a cleaner that you were speaking to at one point? You had a relationship with them who...
I spoke to people in my offices all the time. It was not uncommon for people to see me sitting in the tea room talking to the cleaner. And the reason they could is because they, it was nice to have a cup of tea and, have a bit of an old natter about what's going on. And then they would say, do you know? I said, what? I said, I have a sense of something. I said, go ahead. There's something going on here that I can't quite put my finger on. I said, well, tell me. And I said, well, keep it like that. I won't break confidences. And I never did, actually. Boy, but she spotted something, and by the time I'd done some inquiries, I'd actually come up with a problem that was $200,000 or $300,000 problem that had just been glossed over. Okay, and I had to be very discreet about it. And then I went back to her and I said, "How did you know?" He said, "The way they were behaving." And I said, what are you, like a guru? She says, no, I'm just an ordinary person with some common sense.
There goes that word again.
Yeah.
But it's true. Everything that we're talking about has got to do with relationship, with that word relationship, and how we relate to businesses, trends, ways of being.
Yeah, well.